Joining me now from the foyer of the House of Commons, the Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of National Defence, James Bezan, the NDP's industry critic, Peggy Nash, and the Liberal international trade critic, Chrystia Freeland. Let me quickly go through the cost here, Mr. Bezan. When Jason Kenney reveals that their incremental costs are $122 million thus far, can you give us what is exactly being calculated and how high that could eventually go?
Well, this $122 million represents from the start of the mission to the end of the fiscal year, which is March 31st. We are coming forward, as Minister Kenney said, with our supplemental C estimates and need this incremental cost covered, which is the cost of deploying, the cost of the ramped-up operations that we have undertaken in Iraq in Operation Impact, the cost of course, the munitions that are being used. So there is reasons why we have these extra costs, and we said right from the start that we're going to be open and transparent about reporting the costs back to Parliament through normal processes, and the subsidies are going to be tabled. And so we wanted to make sure that we know the number now. Minister Kenney put out the statement so that Canadians are aware of it. And this is about us, again, being engaged in fighting this genocidal ISIL terrorist organization who, as we just witnessed this weekend, brutally assassinate and behead 21 Coptic Christians in Libya.
And real quick, it's a change. We got a new defense minister. Mr. Nicholson is no longer the defense minister. He said we won't know till the end of the mission. Now, you know, within a week of getting the job, Minister Kenney has released that it's $122 million. What was the holdup before?
But as we said before, and as I said on the show, is that we had reported through normal parliamentary processes, and supplemental Cs are the normal parliamentary process. This is about keeping Parliament informed of the facts, and this is the hard numbers that we need in the $122 million in doing Operation Impact that's above and beyond the normal costs of operating the Canadian Armed Forces.
Peggy Nash, any comment? Now we've got the incremental cost. This will be reflected in the estimates that come out. Any comment on the cost thus far of the mission?
Well, as you know, Evan, we just got that number, so we haven't had a chance to really fully look at it, see what the breakdown is. But, you know, I appreciate the initiative around transparency. What we're looking for is transparency about the mission. Because, as you know, we've had Canadian troops, boots on the ground, in the front lines, returning fire, and that was never put to this House as part of the mission. So, in fact, we were told there would be no boots on the ground in this mission. So we're looking for clarity about the nature of the mission, the plans of the government going forward, what do these costs mean, and what is, you know, we've heard that this could be a slippery slope. What is the plan going forward? We want not just a number, but actual transparency about what's happening with our troops.
You know, by the way, this mission has gone on since October. You know, it sounds like a big number, but when you think about the number of people on the ground, 69 special forces, all the equipment, making a base in Kuwait, the 8 CF-18s, it's not actually a very big number at all, 122 million. So, I mean, obviously we'll wait for the PBO, Parliamentary Budget Officers. They're going to estimate tomorrow as well. But Chrystia Freeland, what's your view on this?
Look, to me, Evan, this speaks to a bigger issue, and that is the chronic underfunding of the Defense Department and underfunding of veteran affairs. And, you know, I think the way that you can summarize this government's foreign policy is talk loudly and carry a small stick. It's a dangerous world. Canada, the government of Canada, has a responsibility to protect Canadians and to contribute positively to world order. But we can't do that if we have loud rhetoric, which is unmatched by the government's financial commitments.
To be fair, let me just put you back. I want to get to Ukraine real quick. I mean, they are the ones that actually decided the rhetoric to put the CF-18s and the special forces on the ground. The Liberals opposed that military mission. What exactly? Where aren't they backing up their rhetoric there versus what you're saying?
Well, as my colleague Joyce Murray said in question period today, there is chronic underfunding of the Department of Defense. And what we're seeing is lots of commitments, lots of great rhetoric, but we are not supporting the Department of Defense. And really crucially, we are not fulfilling the moral obligation we have to our veterans.
Okay, I want to concentrate on, the cost of the mission, $122 million incremental cost thus far for Iraq. In the meantime, I want to move to Ukraine. A ceasefire, quote, is supposed to be when there's a stoppage of firing. Reports from both sides that the firing is still happening in pockets of East Ukraine. We've seen Nalayed showing us pictures of the Ukrainian military moving toward the fight, not away from it. We've seen reports that the Russians are moving equipment towards, not against it. Mr. Bezan, is this ceasefire going to hold? What's next?
Well, as we said before, is that this comes down to Putin's actions and not his words, and this is speaking louder than his words right now. There may have been overall a general de-escalation in the violence in eastern Ukraine, but the fighting that seems to continue and the shelling of positions on multiple occasions over the last 48 hours is really unfortunate. But that's why we are coordinating with Ukraine and providing them with the satellite imagery that they need to determine those Russian movements. So we are sharing that data, and we continue to stand with them in this face of Russian aggression.
Real quick, I talked to Jason Kenney on CBC Radio's The House on the weekend. He also said that Canada is going to send a financial aid package to Ukraine. Can you give me details as to when and what will be in that?
I'm not aware of the details. We've already given over $450 million in financial assistance that is going to improving the economy and reforming their government. We've signed the Joint Commission on Military Reform and Cooperation that we're doing with the Americans and Ukrainians. So we are partnering on a number of fronts. We've relaunched the free trade talks, of course. So we see that there is an entire basket here that we have to be involved in to ensure the success of Ukraine moving into the future. But of course, the security component and their ability to ward off this Russian threat and this increasingly movement of troops and armaments coming across the border is the biggest factor facing the future of Ukraine.
The 48 hours is going to be crucial, Peggy Nash, with the ceasefire, obviously. We have been focusing, and the world's watching, a place called the Baltsova, which is obviously where some of the key fighting is still taking place right now. And what's your concern about the very shaky ceasefire, if indeed it is a ceasefire at all?
Yeah. I mean, I certainly understand the perspective of many Ukrainian Canadians who have no faith in Mr. Putin's ability or desire to respect a ceasefire. I've certainly heard concerns about that. But the Prime Minister has said at this point that there's no intention to send offensive weapons to Ukraine. We feel that the priority needs to be de-escalation. It needs to keep the diplomatic pressure on Mr. Putin in every way possible. There are some billionaires, some tycoons that have been on the sanctions list of the United States and Europe. We'd like to see them on Canada's list as well. We need to squeeze every ounce of diplomatic pressure possible to try to de-escalate this conflict and provide all the support we can.
The question is, if the ceasefire doesn't hold, and we've already had sanctions, are more sanctions the answer? Christopher Freeland, I mean, is that the answer, to increase sanctions on, listen, there's many others, frankly, that could be on the sanctions list, but events seem to be moving very, very quickly here. What's your take on it?
Well, starting with sanctions, more sanctions are part of the answer, and there are two people who are notably absent from the existing Canadian sanctions list. That's Igor Sechin and Sergei Chemezov. These are close friends of Putin's. Chemezov and Putin were in the same place in East Germany together as KGB agents. They're sanctioned by the U.S. They should be sanctioned by Canada. And this is not just, angels dancing on the head of a pin. If Canada wants to have credibility when we're talking to our allies about Ukraine, we have to have these key people on the list. The EU also imposed additional sanctions today, and I think that is a great measure and an important sign from the EU of its seriousness. And there are at least two people on that list that aren't on the Canadian list, Anatoly Antonov and Yosef Kobzon. Both of them should be sanctioned by us. I'm not saying that's the whole answer, Evan, but that's something that we can do. It doesn't cost Canadian taxpayers a penny, and it's a way of showing both Ukrainians and Russia, and most crucially our allies, that we're serious.
Okay, just very quickly, I spoke to Jason Kenney on the weekend. I'll start with you, Christopher Freeland, and just if I could go real quick down the list. He said Canada would be open to providing lethal weapons to Ukraine if this ceasefire doesn't hold and if the allies agree. Christian Freeland, would your party, the Liberal Party, be open to supplying lethal weapons, not just night vision goggles, which are there, and the Gore-Tex, but lethal weapons to help the Ukrainians in a fight if the ceasefire collapses?
What I think has been crucial leading up to these negotiations and will be crucial in whether we see if this ceasefire has any meaning at all is sort of a two-pronged approach, with the Europeans leading the diplomatic effort, but also saying they're not going to ease up on the economic sanctions. But also I think the fact that, particularly in the U.S., the possibility of lethal assistance has been opened up. I think that's an important point of pressure on Russia.
All right, Peggy Nash?
I think we should not rush to undermine the goal of the ceasefire. I think we have to increase the pressure in all ways possible, diplomatically and through sanctions, and not give up on that as a key possibility of escalation. The Prime Minister, in contrast to Minister Kenny, has said he's not considering lethal weapons at this time. We think that's the place to be right now, but we do agree that the Americans having that possibility does put additional pressure on Mr. Putin.
All right, and Mr. Bezan, any movement on if and when Canada might supply lethal weapons to the Ukrainians?
I think, just to clarify what Peggy just said, is that the Prime Minister said that we're going to be extremely cautious on consideration of lethal military equipment. But as Canada has done right from the start, we have sanctioned more Russian and Ukrainian individuals who are responsible for the aggression than any other country in the world. We have brought forward non-lethal equipment and winter gear to kit out over 30,000 Ukrainian troops. We have provided a number of different measures economically and through trade and through training to support the Ukrainian government, and also doing military police training. So everything is on the table, everything is open for consideration, because we want to make sure that Ukraine's sovereignty and territorial integrity is respected.
I got to leave it there. Obviously, everyone's watching what happens. They hope this ceasefire holds, but it looks like both sides, the Ukrainians and the Russian-backed rebels, are moving troops toward the fight, not away from it. The next 48 hours, very, very crucial. James Bezan, Peggy Nash, Christian Freeland. Just minutes ago, we found out the cost of the Iraq mission so far, $122 million incremental costs. More estimates coming out. PBO tomorrow. I appreciate your reaction to all of that. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Evan.
Thanks, Evan.